study looking at.
All right. I'm Mark Rial, this is the YMC, and today we're going to be taking a look at installing WordPress and getting our sites together. We're in the final third of our trip. Things are moving quick, and we're at the point now where we're taking all the stuff that we've been putting together weeks 4, 5, and 6, all our HTML, CSS, JavaScript, and we're going to be taking a look at how we're going to be integrating them into WordPress, into eventually what's going to be our final product. In all honesty, WordPress is an incredible package, right? And you can, like as we've seen before, we can already build some, robust stuff, right? HTML is our core, CSS is our design, JavaScript we can start seeing the interaction and make our sites, almost like living. So the challenge that we face here is that we want to have a solution that doesn't require us to constantly be uploading and downloading our files from the server. So one of the options that we have is the Windows Platform Installer, which we discussed, and this is that one that's available at Microsoft.com/web. You can just download it, install it, and what it basically does is it sets up a development server on your own machine. So you can do all the development you need to do on your own device, and then once the whole project's done, you can get that stuff uploaded as well. So we'll be walking through that procedure. Today's session is a pretty big session, and I guess just to give you guys an idea, so in terms of like other workshops I've done and stuff like that, the stuff that we're going to cover today is probably like the most demanded thing that people get me to come in and talk about, because WordPress is awesome and it's pretty popular these days. So setting up a web server package on your machine, why would you do this? So the whole process of putting a site up online and getting a WordPress installation up online, that's something that we can do. And actually that's something I'm going to start off right now on the go. So WordPress.org, what does that allow us to do? Well, if we take a quick flashback to some of our earlier classes where we talked about having the 3 main machines involved in our web development projects. What this means is that, again, this is us down here on our dev stuff. This is the end user, and this is the server here. What this means basically when WordPress says you can download WordPress and install it on your own domain, what they really mean is that on WordPress's server somewhere, WordPress has this package available to download. The same way I've got today's class files available to download. I've uploaded these via FTP, and you can go to this web address and you can download those files. WordPress has basically the same thing going, right? So there's the current WordPress version, which is this WordPress 3.0.2. They got their current version available on their servers for you to download to your machine. Right? So you can take this and you can download it. And what we're going to be seeing today was we're going to be downloading WordPress, and we're going to be running it and toying around with it on our own machine here. And just to give you a glimpse of what I mean by this, basically what happens is that after we're done making all our tweaks and all our alterations to WordPress here, as we discussed before, when you get a hosting package or whatever, you're also getting space on a server, right? So like we have our YMC servers and what have you. So what we're basically doing is we're downloading the WordPress package, configuring and setting everything up on our machines, and then we're uploading those WordPress files, but this time we're uploading them to our server, right? So that way when people are visiting our website, we've got the whole WordPress package installed on our server, right? So that's basically what's happening. Rather than running, and maintaining a blog on WordPress's servers, WordPress being an open source platform, we can take all the WordPress files and then we can upload those onto our server, and we can run our own WordPress installation on our own machine. All right. Once you have the web platform installer in, basically it appears in your programs, and this platform installer option comes up, and you do need to make sure that you've got administrative privileges to run this. And basically what it'll do is it'll install everything necessary to run some of these applications. Server side and client side languages. And I guess the reason why I like to bring this up is because when I first heard those terms, I didn't really, they didn't make the most sense. I had the most trouble with client side, and for a while I just never really understood what they meant by client side. But to give you an example, like everything that we've done so far has been client side stuff. And by client, they mean that end user machine. right? Everything that gets done in the web browser. So the way the web browser reads and understands HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, those are all client-side languages. JavaScript is a client-side programming language because it gets read and understood, and those instructions are for the web browser. So if we take a look at JavaScript in that regard, it's a programming language for the web browser. PHP, on the other hand, is not a browser thing. Like, you can't write PHP scripts that the browser understands. The browsers don't read and understand PHP. But what does read and understand PHP are servers, right? So that's one of the other distinctions about the different types of software. PHP is a programming language, very similar to JavaScript in terms of what it does as a programming language, but it's understood by server software, right? So Apache or that Windows stuff. So along the lines of Windows, we talked about some of the server-side languages before. So the other guys are ASP and Cold Fusion, right? So different types of languages run on different machines. So one of the new things is that, as Microsoft has gone to, help promote more open source stuff, and this is a recent innovation, right? It's only been within the past couple years that Microsoft has started being able to run PHP stuff on Microsoft servers. So that enables us to be able to put these kind of open source platforms using these kinds of Windows tools. And so your core languages that we've dealt with so far remain unchanged, right? So you can write a Ruby platform and still on the client side it's still all JavaScript, CSS, HTML, right? So these staples, like that stays true in any web project. The only thing that's different is what particular technology they're using to run on the servers there. And for our purposes, what the role PHP plays is it allows us to access our databases. And by access, I mean it allows us to write all of our articles and send them to the database. It allows us to update our stuff from the database. It allows us to display that stuff in the database online. So PHP is kind of like the programming language that does all those interfaces with the database, right? There's actually an acronym for some of the most common server-side type of functions, and it's this one. Very charming and eloquent acronym of CRUD. And what CRUD stands for is create, read, update, delete. Which, when broken down to it, is kind of like the core of what any server-side technology does, right? What do you do? What are you doing when you're running a blog? You're creating content, or you might be going in and updating content. You want people to read the content, and you might be deleting the content, right? So those are kind of the core things of any kind of database-driven project that you might work on, right? Same thing goes for Twitter, right? Create, read, update, delete. It's the same. Those are kind of like the four foundations. And one way of looking at it, and this might be a bit too broad of a generalization, but the way you can kind of think of PHP is that it does all that server and database interaction, but the final output of PHP for our web development purposes is always HTML, right? Or some related text, so HTML, CSS, JavaScript. It's always sending back our client-side stuff. So it does all the server interactions, but what it sends back, what it outputs to the browser, is the stuff that the browser understands, right? So that PHP hypertext preprocessor, that's probably one of the better ways to really wrap your head around what it is that PHP is and what it is that it's doing. What WordPress is a package that provides a really user-friendly way of allowing us to access all this information, and at the end of it, what WordPress sends back to the browser is this hypertext, is this HTML, right? So as we dive more and more into WordPress, we'll see some of the benefits we have there, but keep that in mind, right? Any PHP project, what it's eventually sending back is HTML to the web browser. WordPress stuff we're going to be editing. It's all going to be in PHP. As we saw when we took a quick peek at that WordPress download, all those files were .php files, right? So they were all dealing with PHP stuff. And we're going to get used to seeing, particularly taking a look at these files that have HTML embedded into them. So I guess all of our files are uploaded now. So kind of just bouncing back quick to when we downloaded the WordPress files and then uploaded them to the server. Let's take a look at what happens when we go to that website now. So if you remember, it's on the YMC web server, and I created a directory called dev. So if we go to the YMC site, and if we go /dev, we get this. So what we can do is we can go to this create configuration file, and it tells you what you need to run WordPress, right? It says that you need a database name, username, password, host, and a table prefix. I'll be discussing what those guys are. So if you're installing WordPress on XAMPP, you'll go through this. The thing about the Microsoft Platform Installer is that it bypasses this stuff, where during the installation, you put in the configuration stuff there, and then it automatically builds the database and sets all that stuff up. This one here is a little bit different, but as you can see, it kind of gives you this little precursor about what you're going to need. If you hit this let's go, it prompts you for all that stuff. So this is like sample stuff. What you would need to do is figure out where you need to create your database. So once you have your database created, every database will have a username and password, and your database host is something that we'll discuss as well. So that's what would happen if you just kind of took the WordPress files and installed them and tried to install them on your host immediately that way. I'm going to go back to the platform installer for this machine here. I'm going to go down, take a look under web applications. And I'm just going to find WordPress on that list. So again, I think as I mentioned last week, if there's any like open source platforms that you're interested in checking out, this is probably one of the better ways because it saves a step of having to hunt them down and finding the latest version and so on. And now the first thing, so we're going to be taking a look, once we get this installed and set up, we're going to be taking a look at the various options that are available in the WordPress admin panel. So this is actually the first one in the initial setup. You see this last option down here, allow my site to appear in search engines like Google and Technorati. What that means is that you can, we'll be taking a look at where this is in the programming. You can basically have your site so that it cannot be found on search engines. And why would that be a wise choice to make at this point in the game for us right now? We're not finished, right? So we don't want this dev site to be popping up in search engines. So now if I had everything ready to go and I was putting up my finished site online, then I wouldn't want to uncheck that. But for the time being, I'm going to keep that off and I'm going to say install WordPress. So it's as simple as that. We just filled out those various configuration options and those initial parameters. And now our username is admin, our password is the password that we chose, and we can go in and we can log in to our website. So I'm going to hit login. It's going to take us to our standard WordPress page. And two things here. First of all, I'm going to just open this in a new tab so we can see. So WordPress has installed. It's running. There's the default theme. That's what it looks like right now. And if I go back, username, admin, password, YMC, remember me for now. Log in, we're in our WordPress admin panel. All running on our machine, right? Localhost, you can see up there, localhost/YMC. If we hadn't installed the server, there's no way we would have been able to get this to run on our own machines because we wouldn't have anything on our computer capable of understanding PHP. And now we can go in and we can start editing as though this was a website online. For the recap, today's session, number one, we're going to learn how to get WordPress. Number two, we're going to learn how to install it and configure it. And number three, we're going to learn how to customize it. And then our fourth point would be we're going to learn how to create our own stuff inside the WordPress environment. Session 8 is going to be a pretty busy session. First of all, we're going to take a look at really taking our static content that we've been looking at so far and learning what we can do with PHP and WordPress to take our static sites that we've been building and turn them into something dynamic.